All right. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Meditation from Sinai. We will sit now for an hour and a half in lotus position. No, I'm joking. Don't worry. They say the story of two old friends who were sitting together, and one turns to her friend and says, "Tell me, Jocelyn, how's your husband? Is he still unemployed?" And she says, "No, actually, not anymore." So she says, "All right, that's great news. So what does he do now?" She says, "Oh, now he meditates." She says, "Meditates? What's that?" She says, "I have no idea, but it's better than doing nothing." And another one, of course, because why not? They say this rabbi after the services goes around and says, "Shalom Aleichem" to a congregant. And the congregant says, "Shalom Aleichem." I mean, that's almost like welcoming back from a trip. I didn't go on any trip. You've seen me here for services today, yesterday, the day before. The rabbi says, no. You have this upcoming trip you're going on, a business trip to London. I noticed that during the services, your mind was wandering, but now that the services are over, you're back. So I'm welcoming you back to our little shul here, welcoming you back from landing here. The course that we will be discussing over the next 6 lessons, we're going to go through a wonderful journey of Jewish mindful and meditative practices. We're going to learn to be more deeply aware of ourselves and to see the world as a result through a richer lens. It's going to be focusing on Jewish meditation from within Jewish tradition, and in the context of Jewish life, and we'll touch upon other areas within Jewish life, namely spirituality, mindfulness, and some others. Before we begin, I'd like to thank co-sponsor of tonight's class, Leah Weingarten. Thank you very much for your sponsorship. May God bless you with good health, happiness, and success in all your endeavors, and may it bring only blessings to the home. The blessing of so many people studying Torah. So thank you very much. If you will, take a moment and if you have a pen, if you're able to, jot down 1 or 2 or 3 things that you hope to gain from this course, from tonight and from this course in general. If anyone feels comfortable to share some of their ideas, you can pop it in the chat box. So this course is not a meditation mini retreat. We're not going to be sitting and doing meditations. We will be somewhat practicing meditation and experimenting with a number of different forms of meditation, but we'll be primarily exploring the spiritual technology behind meditation and the roles it plays in Jewish life. Because a lot of Jewish meditation is content-based, we're going to be studying the Jewish spiritual ideas that form the basis of various meditations. Now, some of you have never done meditation before, some of you have done meditation before, and some of you are somewhat like me, somewhere in between. Thank you, Leah, for putting that in the chat box. And some of us are kind of in between. We've heard somewhat about meditation. It's interesting to us. It's something that we've have dabbled once or twice in. And so before we begin, we need to define what exactly is meditation. And so imagine in your mind someone meditating. Take a moment and think about it. How do you imagine? What does it look like, someone who's meditating? Now, some of you may have envisioned someone sitting on the top of the mountain meditating. Some of you may have envisioned someone in an ashram somewhere meditating, sitting in a yoga pose, sitting in some sort of upside down pose, in various poses or doing various things, walking outdoors, sitting in the backyard, looking at some Japanese garden, or whatever it may be. Playing basketball for all you know. I don't know how each one envisions what meditation is, but the truth is, however you've envisioned meditation is true. It's all true. They're all meditating, but it's also not true. It's also wrong. It's right and wrong. Why? Because meditation has no set image. It can be applied to anything. What is meditation? What is a definition of the word meditation? So in the dictionary, the definition is to meditate is to engage in contemplation or reflection. Meditation comes from the Latin word meditare, which means to measure, to think, contemplate, devise, ponder. So in essence, whether we like it or not, whether we think about it or not, we are chronic meditators. We meditate all time. At every moment of any given day, we're meditating. We meditate when we walk. We meditate when we talk. We meditate when we're baking. We meditate when we're going to sleep. We're constantly meditating. And so the goal of this course is really to not just meditate, but to meditate mindfully, to meditate purposely. And so in this course, we're defining meditation as the effort to purposefully focus on our minds and develop a deep awareness to achieve a desired result. That's what we're going to focus on. Which brings us to another point, and that is a question that I got from one or two of the people that I called about this course. And they said, Rabbi, you're teaching meditation. Really? What's going on? Is the pulpit not good enough? It doesn't pay? You got to go look for a different theme. What's going on over here? Why are you going into meditation? Which reminds me of a joke, of course. This elderly Jewish woman travels to the Himalayan mountains, and she starts asking around. She needs to meet a specific guru. And she asks around, and she finds out that the guru is in this specific ashram somewhere in deep Himalayan mountains, and she makes the trek. She takes a plane, a boat, a bus, a train. I mean, it takes like it's multiple weeks until she's finally able to make it in the vicinity in those mountains. And she meets one of the guru's assistants, and he says, sorry, you can't meet him. He's busy, he's contemplating, he's meditating, he's on the top of the mountain that's really unreachable. And she says, no, I must reach him. And she finally convinces them that she's got to meet him. So they say, okay, but on condition you only say 8 words or less. He's very busy meditating. All right. She goes ahead and she hitches a ride with some ox cart. And then after that, there has a Sherpa guide who guides her. And she finally makes it to the top of the mountain, and she sees the guru, and keeping it under the 8-word limit, she whispers in his ear and she says, Shmuel, it's your mother. It's time to come home. Jews are always wandering, Jews are always looking, but that's not where I'm headed. Why am I talking about meditation? And where does meditation come from? So the reality is that Jewish meditation, as a matter of fact, predates any record of the more famous Eastern meditation traditions, believe it or not. Judaism has its own rich history, vibrant culture, and unbroken practice of meditation that is an integral part of Jewish life. Now, contemporary meditation became popularized from Eastern meditative practices, but Judaism has taught and promoted a unique brand of meditation since its inception. The inception of Judaism began with our patriarchs, and the meditation was so fundamental and so central to the founding fathers of Judaism, the patriarchs, that they designed their lives to accommodate their meditative practices. As we see in text 1 on page 3, the Midrash tells us the patriarchs chose to be shepherds so that they could be alone in the wilderness where the air is clean and pure and they would be far from other people for the sake of secluding themselves in divine meditation. They designed their life around it to be able to meditate in the fields. The meditation was obviously different because Jewish meditation has an entirely different focus and different practices and different goals. The goal of Jewish meditation is to meditate on God, and that is what the patriarchs did. We don't have their specific meditation practices, but we do know that they've successfully developed a spiritual awareness and a deep relationship with God. That is one place where we find meditation practices in Judaism from early on. Another place where we find that meditation is so central to Jewish life is in prayer. And you've heard this from me many, many times. You see, we have a set text and formula in a ritualized format when it comes to our daily prayers. But prayer is termed in the Torah as avoda shebelev, service of the heart. It's an inner cognitive and emotional experience. This definition of prayer is actually in the Hebrew word of prayer. The Hebrew word of prayer is tefillah. Tefillah does not translate only to prayer. It includes prayer, which is asking for our needs, but that's bakasha in Hebrew. The Hebrew word for prayer is tefillah. What does tefillah mean? So if you look on page 4, tefillah means, in one context, it's used in the book of Samuel. If one commits a crime against another, and it uses the term philel, which is the same root as tefillah, he will be judged by a judge. What does it mean to judge? That's what tefillah means. What are we judging during prayer? An introspective exercise of self-judgment. It's a time for introspection. Elsewhere, we find in the Mishnah, it uses the term hatofa, which is also from the same root word as tefillah, which means one who glues an earthenware vessel. To connect, to glue, to cement a relationship with God. That's what prayer is. It's that time for introspection. It's that time with building and strengthening that deep connection with the Almighty. In other words, meditation. Now, this is not a course on prayer. We have had a number of classes on prayers. There are other courses that, God willing, we will give in the future on prayer, but we're not going to be focusing uniquely on prayer here. What we are is just using this idea where we see, and we'll be mentioning prayer throughout the 6 weeks, because it is connected to meditation. And therefore, it's not surprising that one of the most explicit references we have to meditation in the Talmud is connected to prayer. As we see in text 2 on page 5, says the Talmud as follows. We must approach prayer with reverence. The early pious sages would pause in thought for 1 hour so that they could focus their hearts on God and only then pray. These pious sages had a serious regimen of meditation every single day. For an hour before they prayed, not only during prayer, for an hour before prayer, they would meditate. And the Talmud there continues that they would meditate following the prayer as well, which goes into a whole different discussion that's discussed in the Talmud. How exactly did they study Torah? Because if they, right, we have 3 prayers a day, and if they contemplated prayer and meditated on it for an hour before and an hour after, and then each prayer took them an hour, there are 3 prayers, that's a total of 9 hours. They have to eat, sleep, and drink when they have time to pray, to study Torah. So the Talmud discusses that. But the idea that we see here is that there was the importance, the central focus of meditation throughout Jewish history. I'll take a moment and think, what are some ways in which meditation might advance Jewish goals? So some of you may be thinking there are to better understand God, to connect with God. It's real prayer, spiritual growth, to become better people, to become kinder people, to connect better to other people, to be present, to be aware. And those are all good answers, which is really what we're going to be focusing on today. But before we go any further, there's an important disclaimer that I'd like to make. And I've made this to a number of people while talking about this course. Jewish meditation can mean a few different things. And therefore, it's important to clarify what we mean over here when we say in this course, Jewish meditation. In general, meditation practices come in all sorts of shapes and sizes. There's many meditation groups, many meditation centers. They do all different types of things for health reasons, for practical reasons, for spiritual reasons, for mystical reasons. For the sake of this course, we're going to divide meditation into three general categories. The first category is meditation, which is foreign to Judaism. Practices that are part of a system of idol worship, of paganism, or grew out of these practices. Many Eastern meditations utilize names of deities, problematic elements which are problematic for Jewish practitioners, and the Eastern meditations which stem from these ideas. These are obviously not part of this course, and we have to avoid those entirely. As a Jew, they are spiritually unhealthy for us. They're detrimental to the Jewish soul. Then there's a second category, and those are neutral. Meditation practices that have no religious goals and no religious basis and no religious mantras or names or terms or ideas. They're designed to relax, to elicit gratitude, to better athletic performance, many other things that they are used for. Many of them have health benefits, medical benefits, and they are sometimes mixed into Jewish context and utilized with Jewish themes and spins and ideas and so on and so forth. Although these are neutral, we're not going to be focusing on these meditations either. It's not the subject of these lessons. What is the subject of these lessons? This third category: meditation practices that are organic to Judaism and rooted in Jewish texts, traditions, and practices. That's what we're going to be focusing on. And so let's begin. When it comes to meditation, there are three Hebrew words that are generally used interchangeably, but they have slightly different meanings. And we're going to use them throughout this course to denote three types of categories of meditation within Judaism that perhaps play different roles in Jewish life. It's not set in stone, but it definitely gives us an idea, and we'll see these pop up throughout the subsequent 6 weeks. These three terms are as follows, and you may have come across them throughout your studies of Judaism. The first one is hisbaididut, or hisbaididus, however you'd like to pronounce it, which means seclusion, which is really transcendence meditation. Meditation which enables us to transcend the physical realm. Following that, we have a second term called hitbonenut, or hisbeinenus, which means contemplation, contemplative meditation. And finally, the third one is kavanah, focus, which generally is the meditation practice of mindfulness or intention meditation, which is what we actually are going to be discussing tonight. And so here goes. For the most part, Jewish meditation is focused on strengthening our relationship with God, deepening our Jewish engagement. However, as a side goal, a side benefit to these spiritual goals, Jewish meditation also provides practical tools for a more balanced and healthy living, which is also an important Jewish value. One of the most common reasons why people get into meditation in the first place, and this is a study that has been done, why people start meditation and meditation practices. One of the most common reasons, or if not, I believe it's the most common reason why people get involved in meditation, is in order to reduce negative experiences or stress. After all, we want to be happy, but inevitably life throws things at us or around us that trigger us in some unwanted ways. It gets us to have these knee-jerk reactions that we are not happy about, and it creates negative emotions and it sours our mood. Right? Some examples, very common examples: anger, hurt, anxiety, self-doubt, any other unwanted feeling. They weigh us down and they have somewhat of a negative impact on our lives. And so today we're going to focus on that exact idea. One of the foundational underpinnings of Jewish meditation is how we can harness it as a tool to overcome negative emotions. And not only that, but even more than that, its radical capacity to cultivate positivity. And so we're going to begin with somewhat of a meditation, not a meditation, but just a thought exercise. Jot down or think in your mind, if you don't have a pen handy, a negative experience that you had recently. Let's not go too deep. It doesn't have to be something traumatic, something tremendous. It shouldn't be that. It should be something small, something negative, something that, someone cut you off, or you experience some road rage from someone else, or you hit your knee, something not quite life-altering, just something small, a negative experience. And then jot down some of the feelings, the negative feelings that experience created. Using the example of road rage, you were upset at the person who cut you off. It may have been for a fleeting second, but you were upset at a person. Or it may have been for longer, until you arrived home 20 minutes later. Chances are that most of us did not have too hard a time to think of such an idea. While negative experiences don't necessarily overwhelm us, they're unwanted, they have a real effect on our mood sometimes. And sometimes it's so strong that it sometimes has an effect on our capacity to function. And when we struggle with these feelings that sometimes feel like a never-ending cycle, try as we might, we can't seem to escape that rabbit hole of negative thought and behavior patterns that inevitably have a negative effect on us. It's just one after another. It's this negative feeling, and then it puts us in that mood, and then we do things that we're not happy about, and so we have those negative feelings again. We feel like it spirals out of control sometimes. So here's the good news. The good news is that this struggle is not inevitable. We can win over our emotions. We are not hostages to our feelings. And as human beings, we have the innate power to overcome these unwanted feelings. And we see this clearly in the Torah's instructions to soldiers going out to war on the front line. Text 3 on page 8. Shmuel, can you read for us text 3 from the book of Deuteronomy?
Yes. Jewish meditation is primarily focused on providing religious depth, but it also offers the tools
of lesson 1. Text 3. Is that text 3 in the Uh-oh. Is my book different than yours?
Page 8, Conquering Fear.
Page 8, just a moment. Yeah, page 8, Conquering Fear.
Okay.
Yeah, as you approach the battle. No, now you're on mute.
Trouble here, yeah.
There we go. Text
As you
Conquering
approach,
Fear.
okay, as you approach the battle, the Kohen shall come near and speak to the people. He shall say to them, "Hear, Israel, today you are approaching the battle against your enemies. Do not be discouraged. Do not be afraid. Do not be alarmed or terrified because of them." Is that it?
Yeah. So what do we have here? We have Jewish soldiers going out to battle. They're going out to war. They have plenty of reasons to be petrified. They have plenty of reasons to be afraid, yet the Torah commands them, do not be afraid. Control your fears. It's a feeling, it's an innate feeling, it's a natural feeling, it's a knee-jerk feeling that we think that we have no control over. Do not be afraid. How can the Torah give us a commandment over our fears? It's a positive commandment. An action, we can have a commandment. It makes sense. Do this, don't do that. How can the Torah command us for a feeling? Yet the Torah seems to expect and hint over here that we do have mastery over seemingly natural fears and feelings, even fears that are caused by real mortal danger, like going out to war. And if something as tremendous as war, as death, sure, the Torah tells us that we can control our fear and our feelings. Surely we can control feelings that are born out of lesser aggressions and perceived problems or real problems. From the perspective of Judaism, you absolutely have the power to overcome your inner emotional adversaries. But as many things are, it's easier said than done. Sounds like a great idea. Yes, we have the control. You can do it. But really, can we? Can we do it? How is it done? There are many self-help books out there. There are many tools out there. But today we're going to learn a simple yet powerful mindfulness technique from the Torah that will enable us to stop the cycle of feeling bad. It will improve our mood, and it'll enable us to be a master over our feelings and not vice versa. But before we get to study the actual technique, let's get a better understanding of how we function as human beings. What is the human process? And once we have a good understanding of the flow of our consciousness, then we'll be able to better appreciate what the process of meditation does and how we can use it. According to Jewish mysticism, every human soul is comprised of 10 unique attributes or functions, 10 unique functions. In Hebrew, they're called sefirot or kochot, 10 unique functions. Via these 10 capacities, we explore the world around us and interact with it. What are these 10 functions? So this is how it's presented in Kabbalah. In Hebrew, it's right to left. So we have the right column, the left column, and then the middle column. What's the right column? Chachma, which is wisdom. It's on page 10 as well in the book. Chachma, wisdom, bina, understanding, dat, knowledge. And then we have chesed, kindness, gevura, restraint, tiferet, compassion, harmony, netzach, victory, ambition, hod, which is splendor, humility, yesod, connection, and malchut, which is royalty, receptiveness. And we're not going to go through all 10, but suffice it to say that these are the 10 attributes, the 10 functions through which we explore the around us and interact with it. But in Kabbalah, it explains how they are split into two general categories. The first category is a category of our intellect. The first three of these 10 is Chachma, Bina, Dat, wisdom, knowledge, wisdom, understanding, and knowledge. These relate to our mental and cognitive life. The following 7, beginning from kindness through Malchut, through receptiveness, relates to our emotional response capacity. In the original Hebrew, they're called, intellect is seichel, right? Your grandmother used to say seichel. Has seichel? Do you have seichel? Do you have a mind? Right? That's the mind is comprised of the first 3. And the emotions, the heart, the mind and the heart, the mind is the first 3, the heart is the following 7. Our intellectual powers are what we generally refer to as our mind. It is the part of us that thinks, that processes things rationally, that analyzes data, collects data, analyzes it, judges it, and makes a determination based on it. This is our capacity to think objectively, to understand ideas, to problem solve. Then we have the second half, which is our emotional powers, what we call our heart. It's the capacity that we have for subjective feelings towards things, whether positive or negative. We employ these to hate, to love, to get excited, to get angry, to feel happy, to feel sad. They are the part of us that makes us drawn to certain things and repulsed by others. But here's where it gets interesting. By default, the soul operates, the human consciousness operates in a linear fashion. Consciousness flows from the intellect into the emotion. How we understand something shapes the way we feel about it. Once the mind understands, the emotions follow. If we understand something positive and we get excited, we want it, we understand its benefits, we get excited about it. We feel something is something that should cause us to be fearful of something, then that will bear the emotion of fear. As the Alter Rebbe, the founder of Hasidism, writes in the book of Tanya, text 4 on page 11, the human soul is divided into 2 categories, intelligence and emotion. The intellectual faculties, namely Chachma, wisdom, Bina, understanding, and Dat, knowledge, are referred to as the mothers and the source of the emotions. For the emotions are the offspring of the intelligence. Our minds develop an idea, understand something, judge a situation, and our hearts naturally follow close behind, leading us to a certain way and to respond accordingly. That's the flow of human consciousness. We understand it, and then we feel it. It's automatic. But then there's another layer that we need to learn about the soul. And that is the interface. For those who are technological savvy, we'll use a metaphor momentarily about that. What do I mean by the interface? This other layer that we need to learn about is the way the soul interacts with the world around it, or expression, active consciousness. The soul has 3 outlets or interfaces that it functions with, and they are referred to in Kabbalah as garments. What are the 3 garments? First one is machshava, thinking, thought. Second is dibur, speech. And the third is maisa, action, doing. Why do we call these 3 garments? Because as opposed to the body, which is actually you, garments are things that we can put on and take off at will. Your intelligence and emotions are you. On the other hand, your thoughts, speech, and action are ways in which you express yourself. Let's use this metaphor, right? I mentioned about smartphones. We all have smartphones, technology. On the smartphones, what do we have? We have apps, various types of apps, which are short for applications. We have various types of apps, right? We have the phone app, we have the WhatsApp app, we have the game app, we have the email app. We have various apps on our smartphones or tablets. Now imagine you have a tablet. It has the hard drive. You download the apps. It takes up storage space, but you don't have a screen on that smartphone. It's missing the screen. The glass screen is just missing. Or you have the glass screen, but it's missing the operating system. It's missing the iOS. If you have an Apple iPhone, it's the iOS. If you have the Android, it's so many different names, or Android is the operating system. But they have like Jelly Bean and whatever, they have various names for it. But if you don't have the operating system, or if you don't have the screen, you have the apps on the phone and you have the phone, but you have no way of expressing those apps. You need that interface, you need that screen or the operating system in order for those apps, the email app, to function. Right, so if you have a phone and you take it out and you want to go ahead and open the email app to check your email. If your screen is broken, you can't check your email, but while you have the phone, it has the memory, it's taking up space on your phone, your email, but you're missing the screen, you're missing the interface. It makes no difference if the body is there, the soul is there, it's missing the interface, it's not going to be able to be used. So too over here. As a person, we have the intellect, we have the emotions. But without thought, speech, or action, we have no way of expressing that intellect or those emotions. An emotion needs to be expressed. How is the emotion expressed? Either through thought, which it isn't expressed to someone outside of us. We're expressing it to ourselves through thought, but it's a form of expression. And then we can express it to others through speaking or through doing. But if I don't think, speak, or do, I have no way to express that intellectual concept or that emotion. So in other words, when you're busy agonizing over something, to use an example, an emotional faculty is being activated. And you're accessing one of the garments, which is thought. When you're accessing that garment for the focus of analyzation of this intellectual capacity, all other capacities are inactive. And you have the power to switch those garments at will. If you're thinking about something, you have the power to stop thinking about that and to now apply your thought to something else. If you're speaking about something, you have the power to speak about one topic, stop speaking about it, and switch it to speak about a different topic, which is why they're called garments, because you can switch them at will. And now we're going to do an actual meditation. I'm not going to, because I'm not a professional. We have a short video. And if you will indulge yourself in joining this meditation where we see this concept put into play.
Thoughts produce feelings. Therefore, even a microsecond of thought in any situation produces an emotion. If we have negative emotions, we can simply displace them by replacing them with a new thought. Not a difficult process, and let me share with you a meditation to try to carry out that particular function. So gently close your eyes and just become aware of the flow of your thoughts. What thoughts are flowing through onto the screen of your consciousness? And as you become aware of the thought, see if you can identify a feeling that arises as a consequence of that thought. I would like you to take yourself back to a moment, to a time when you might have been embarrassed, a situation of personal embarrassment. Try to locate that particular incident, refreshing it in your mind. Note all the points that cause the embarrassment. Become aware of the people who are present. And become acutely aware of your feelings of embarrassment at that time. And now, let's switch that thought. I want you to think back to a moment when you were supremely happy, ecstatic, somewhere in your life where you felt absolute joy. Recall that moment. Where were you? Who was there? Can you recall the voices, the colors, the background sounds? And now consider, where did that image of embarrassment of a few moments ago disappear? The feelings went away because new thoughts were brought into the consciousness of your mind. Let's try that again. Now think back to a time where you hurt yourself physically, maybe injured yourself, sprained an ankle. Take yourself back there and feel the pain. Simulate it. Recognize how you felt. Even complex feelings. Beyond the pain. Consequences. And now, turn your mind to a birthday party in your honor that you may have experienced as a child, as an adult. What is going on at the party? Who is there? Singing. Maybe a cake. Maybe candles. How do you feel? that same happiness has been recreated. What happened to that feeling of hurt and pain of a few moments ago when you hurt yourself back then? You changed your thoughts, and therefore your feelings changed. Let's learn an important lesson. Moach shalit al halev. The mind determines the outcomes of the emotions. Change your mind, and you change your feelings. When feeling down, depressed, change your thoughts. And in so doing, your whole emotional makeup transforms in the same moment.
So thank you to Rabbi Label Wolf from Australia, from down under, a great teacher of Kabbalah, which gives us the understanding that when we focus on this model of consciousness, we see that there are three elements in the process of an unwanted feeling. There's the unwanted emotion, the emotion itself. There's the understanding that gave birth to the emotion. And then there is the garment that facilitated the emotion, that facilitated the process, which is most commonly our thought. Now, when we have a negative feeling, we can try to combat the feeling head on the emotional or intellectual level, which is at the level at which we intuitively think, which is our essence. But that's extremely challenging and can often require a lifetime of effort, which is why so many of us regularly struggle. And it is something that Hasidic thought discusses elsewhere. It's something that we ought to work on, but it does take a lifetime. But then there's a much easier and more accessible way to combat these negative feelings, and that is at the thought level. And that's what we're going to focus on. And say this guy comes to the rabbi and he says, "Rabbi, do you have a few minutes?" And the rabbi says, "Sure." They sit down and this guy just unloads on the rabbi for an hour straight about all the tzaras that he has. His Bitcoin investments went down and his mother's not giving him the right food and his wife is this and his children don't talk to him. And it's just going on and on and on about all the tzaras that he has. Finally, after going on and on and on about all the tzaras, he turns to the rabbi and he says, "Look, Rabbi, thanks so much for listening to me. You know, truthfully speaking, the problems didn't go away, but you know what did go away? My headache. It's gone." So the rabbi says, "You know, your headache didn't travel far. Now I have a headache." And when it comes to issues, we can deal with the issues head on, or we can deal with the issues in a more accessible and easier way. So when it comes to these types of issues, the issues of negative feelings and the knee-jerk reaction we have occasionally, and the negative, not any type of negative feeling, we ought to work on the core issue, but that takes a lifetime. How do we work on it as we go along in day-to-day life? And that is by focusing on the garments of thought. What are garments? What does that mean? That means to say, what we're saying here is that the garments are not the soul itself. Your thoughts are not you. Once again, your thoughts, your speech, your action, your thoughts are not you. You can observe them. And like a piece of clothing, you can change them. They don't define you. They don't control you. They're a behavior just like speech and action. And you can opt in or opt out. Once again, a quote from Tanya. Text 5 on page 13. The mind naturally controls the heart. This is a fundamental teaching from the Alter Rebbe. The mind naturally controls the heart. Humans were created from birth with the ability to exercise willpower to control the drives of our hearts so that they not be expressed in our behavior, speech, or thoughts. We are able to divert our attention completely from things our hearts crave to something entirely different. We're not changing our essence. We're changing our behavior, speech, or thoughts. This is known as meta thinking, which is what the ability to think about our thoughts and by extension redirect them. How does that help with unwanted feelings? Many of us during that video or the moments before it started or the moments after, our mind wandered. Our mind wanders all the time. As a matter of fact, recent research says that an average person has more than 6,000 thoughts a day. How many of those thoughts can you remember? Precious few. When our thoughts are unconscious, they are tools in the hands of our minds and our hearts. They unconsciously shape our judgments, which automatically produces feelings and reactions, all of which are projected subconsciously in our thinking. And that's why we react to things in ways that are beyond our control. But thought does not have to be unconscious. We have the ability to think deliberately and to be in control of our thought process. When we intentionally control our thoughts, we reverse the process of the soul's consciousness and use thought to shift focus of our mind and heart. We retain full control. If we cut a negative thought, then the negative feeling that's associated with that thought will dissipate. It doesn't deal with the issue itself, but controlling our thoughts cuts off the internal process of the issue, which gets rid of the negative feelings. Which brings us to a very, very powerful letter, which some of you may recall a few months ago, we actually discussed this letter somewhat at length in a regular Tuesday night class. This is a letter from the 1820s, in the late 1820s, that was written by the third Chabad Rebbe, Rabbi Menachem Mendel Schneerson, the Rebbe's great-grandfather, whom the Rebbe is named for. And he's known by his magnum opus, the Tzemach Tzedek, and he's known as the Tzemach Tzedek of Lubavitch, of Chabad. And so the Tzemach Tzedek is writing this letter to his mechutin. Mechutin means this individual's his daughter married a son of the Tzemach Tzedek. So the Tzemach Tzedek's son was this individual's son-in-law. His name was Reb Shlomo Freitas. And Reb Shlomo at the time wrote a letter to his mechutin, to his Rebbe, the Tzemach Tzedek, and he expressed his worries about his declining health, about some other things that he felt powerless over. And the only thing he felt that he was able to do was to pray to God that God remove the mental anguish. The Tzemach Tzedek wrote a fascinating response. It's a few pages. We're not going to go through the entirety of it, but he criticizes Rabbi Shlomo Freitas' sole reliance on prayer and provides a practical technique to overcome his mental struggles based on what we just learned. Leah, can you read for us text 6 on page 14?
Even if we are emotionally afraid, we are able to divorce our thoughts, speech, and action from that emotion. The essential thing is not to contemplate or discuss the fear at all, but to do the perfect opposite. Immediately upon letting go of the thought entirely, the fear will dissolve on its own. At the very least, it will become instantly dormant and not felt in the body. Then, over the course of several days, it will completely dissolve to the point that it will not enter our mind at all. Removal of the thought leads to dispensation of the fear because emotions are entirely reliant upon intellectual focus, from their existence, which requires active thought. Therefore, by removing our thought from the matter, the intellectual power, das, is withdrawn from the emotion with the result that the emotion ceases to be activated. It is worth training ourselves to remove all negativity, for we must rid ourselves from all fear, including justifiable fear, as I wrote. This is certainly true in your case, where there is nothing to worry about whatsoever, thank Hashem, in terms of your health and financial situation.
Thank you. So if we're consciously aware of our thoughts, we can stop thinking about what we don't want to, effectively cutting off our attention to the problem. And without the garment of thought, the mind can function to activate the heart and the negative feelings dissipate. And there's a great story that we've mentioned many times also in connection to this letter, which proves this point. Rabbi Moshe Meislish was a great student of the Alter Rebbe, of the founder of Hasidism, of Chabad, and in the famous war of Napoleon against the Tsarist Russia. Long story, we're not going to get into it, but there was a debate who should win, what's a greater benefit for Judaism. Should the Tsar win or should Napoleon win? And for whatever reason, which is beyond the scope of this class, the Alter Rebbe of Chabad felt that it would be better for the Tsar to win. So much so that he get involved in the war effort that he appointed his student to become a spy on behalf of the Tsar in Napoleon's strategizing team for the army. His name was Moshe Meislish. He spoke many, many languages, including French, and he slowly made his way up until he became part of the core team that would create the military strategies. At one point, they noticed that any strategy they came up with, the French, the Tsar's government knew about it already. The Russian army was 2 steps ahead. And so they knew that there must be a spy in their midst. Try as they might, they can't find a spy. And at one point, they were in the middle of a strategic meeting. There were only about 10 people in the room poring over maps, including Moshe Meislish, this great Hasidic Jew. And Napoleon bursts into the room. And he lines up everyone against the wall. And he says, there is a spy, and one of you are the spy. And he doesn't ask them questions. He just goes and places his hand above their heart, knowing certainly that the spy's heart will be pounding faster than a Lamborghini. And he goes ahead and he walks over and he starts feeling the hearts, and try as he might, he cannot spot the spy. And he leaves the room empty-handed. Later, the Moshe Meislish explained how was he able to control his heart. He says, I was afraid, I was petrified. But how was I able to control my heart? It's a natural reaction. I utilized this meditation of the idea that our mind can control our heart. And I was able to stop my heart from pounding. If we stop our negative thoughts, that stops the negative feelings from coming in. But it's important to clarify that in practice, controlling our thoughts does not mean to battle unwanted thoughts or trying not to think about them, because that will never work. The approach has to be to stop the negative thought process in its tracks. Why? Because if you start reasoning, if someone starts reasoning with a negative thought and you start to reason it away in the moment, not only is it ineffective, it deepens the pathway of that particular thought in your brain, and it solidifies its place in your brain. It's like quicksand. The faster you move, the deeper you get sunk into it. And so when something happens to trigger you into going down the spiral of negative thoughts, what do we have to do? We have to imagine it like a phone call. We pick up the phone and someone's on the other end berating us, abusing us, saying things that we don't want to hear. We don't argue with them. We don't try to argue away or think about how what they're saying is unimportant. We just hang up. We hang up and we move on to something else. We just hang up. So when something negative comes our way, a negative thought enters our mind, let's not try to battle it, because if we try to battle it, it's just going to get us deeper into the quicksand. We just got to hang up. But if we try not to think about it, that doesn't work either. And Shmuel, I thought about you when I was preparing this part. There's the famous example given by the famous Russian novelist Dostoevsky. He writes, try not to think about a polar bear. It's a famous psychological test. Try not to think about a polar bear, and you will see that it's going to show up in your mind every single second. Everyone try it now. Right now, everyone think about something except for a polar bear. Try really hard not to think about a polar bear. The more you try not to think about a polar bear, that polar bear is there in front of your face. It's there constantly, it keeps on popping up. But I'm trying so hard not to, you cannot not think about something. So what do? Our mind is constantly working. Our mind is constantly running. What do? Right? Moshe Dayan was once speeding on the highway. He gets Moshe Dayan, the famous Israeli general, and he had an eye patch over one of his eyes. He lost it in a battle before Israeli independence. I forget which battle he lost it in, but I think he was fighting for the British at the time that he lost his eye. He was famous for his eye patch. He was the minister of defense at the time. He was a famous Israeli general. He gets pulled over for speeding on the highway. And the police officer says, you, Adoni, the minister, the defense minister, you're speeding on the highway. So General Dayan turns to the police officer and he says, Shoter, officer, I only have one eye. Where do you want me to keep it? On the speedometer or on the road? So how do we make sure we don't think about negative thoughts? What do? We can't just stop thinking, because you can't just hang up the phone. Our mind is constantly wandering. The way we do it is as follows. We don't stop thinking about that. We think about something else in its place. A person can only have one active thought at a time. When you switch your active thinking to something else, the original thought process that was running in your head is done. It's discarded. As the Tzemach Tzedek continues in that letter, text 7. Alec, can you read for us text 7 on page 16?
The primary method of removing worrying thoughts from your mind is by redirecting your mind toward other matters. You can replace them with thoughts of necessary material matters that bring you joy, and you can contemplate Hashem's Torah that delights the heart. The latter is best achieved through creating a fixed schedule of daily Torah study, which is particularly effective with a study partner.
Thank you. So when you notice something negative popping in your mind, there's one way you can stop it in its tracks, and that's not by don't think about the polar bear, as Dostoevsky says, because you're not going to get too far. How do we do it? By thinking about something else. What should I think about? Think about anything. What about, you have an unwanted thought in your mind? Don't say, I'm going to stop thinking about it. Say, I'm now going to think about how the Rams are going to win the Bengals. Bengals? How did you pronounce it? Right?
Bengals.
Sorry?
Bengals.
Bengals. Thank you. That's what I'm going to think about. I'm going to think about the astronomical price SoFi Stadium costed us. That's what I'm going to think about. Right? I'm going to think about something. You see, no one thought about a polar bear the past 30 seconds. Everyone was thinking about SoFi Stadium, the upcoming Super Bowl. Why? Because if you move your mind to something else, that's what you're going to be actively thinking about. Now, there are two things that we can be thinking about. We can either be thinking about mundane objects, which are fine. Think about mundane objects, and that'll make sure, as long as it's something positive, something good. And if we think about it, it's going to, where are we? Here we are. If we think about something good, it's a good thing. So think about it. Think about the Super Bowl. Think about a nice meeting you had this morning. Think about a nice interaction you had at the store this morning. Think about the prices in Ralph's versus Vaughn's. You know, if that's what gets you to smile. Think about something else. And if you think about something else, automatically that initial negative thought is going to leave you. But what's something better that you can think about? A Torah thought. Have your mind wander to the Torah discussion that we're having now, the one that you studied on Tuesday night, or Torah that you studied on your own time. Something from Torah. It pays to have a positive or uplifting thought in your back pocket so that you can pull out and meditate it at any moment necessary. But it's not just that. It serves a second purpose, a deeper purpose. Not only will that negative thought dissipate when you change to a positive thought, in its place, a positive thought will now shape your mood and your life for the better. Because when you fill your mind with a positive thought and you focus on it, it creates now a positive feedback loop. The positive thinking directs your mind to positive things and activates positive emotions that now create a positive posture, positive attitude, positive feelings. Suddenly you're in a great mood. Right? To quote another philosophical idea, when you have it, which we'll get to in a moment, where the idea is it not only creates positivity for yourself, but it creates positivity for everyone around you, right? When a wing flaps and when a butterfly flaps off the coast of Japan, it causes a tsunami off the coast of California, something of that sort. Don't quote me on that, but I'm paraphrasing the philosophical idea, but that's the idea. It creates a whole new positive feedback loop, which is tremendous, which is why there's an ancient Jewish custom to know chapters of the Mishnah, chapters of Psalms by heart, verbatim. Why? Because if one's walking and a negative thought falls in their mind, they're not around the book. You want to have something Torah that can automatically, you can say it. And when you say something, it strengthens your focus on it and you're able to think about it stronger. To have a Torah idea, to constantly study Torah. Because this way you always have something in your back pocket ready to switch when that negative thought comes into your mind. But it's even deeper than that. The potency of a positive meditation, that moment where we switch to something positive, is much more than just a psychological life hack. The Hasidic masters teach us something radical, and that is that our thoughts and mood actually shape and determine how things will play out around us. Positive thinking doesn't just make us feel better inside, it creates real change in the world outside of us as well. Here's how the Tzemach Tzedek continues in that letter. Text 8. Heather, can you please read for us text 8 on page 17? You have to unmute.
To the contrary, you should speak and act in a manner that projects positivity, as described above, so that these positive emotions will be established within you. In this way, a spirit of joy and good-heartedness will descend upon you from above. I say this on the basis of a teaching I received from my holy grandfather of blessed memory, who shared an insight authored by Rabbi Dov Ber, the Maggid of Mezerich, into the verse, like a person's appearance upon it from above. The Maggid would read the verse this way: according to the feelings a person displays down here in this world, like a person's appearance, so is the nature of that which rests upon the person from above, upon it from above. In light of this teaching, my grandfather, Rabbi Shneur Zalman of Liadi, did not permit me to sing a melancholy tune during the evening prayer. After I had completed the prayer, he explained his reasoning for objecting to my choice of medley, and shared the above insight in the name of the Maggid of blessed memory.
Thank you. So this teaching of the Maggid of Mezrich is incredible. What the Maggid is saying, that based on our thoughts and attitudes, we attract experiences in kind. If we project positivity, if we act in a positive manner, we elicit from above, from God, a positive response, which translates into actual materialistic blessings, into real blessings. And the opposite is also true. If we're negative, if we project negativity, as we see in this anecdote of the Tzemach Tzedek, he said, I wanted to sing a melancholy tune, and my grandfather told me, no, because that's going to draw down negativity upon you, negative energy, right? Sending vibes, sending energy. I'm feeling the energy. This is a Torah concept. When we act positive, when we think positively, it actually draws down from above. God sees we're being positive. God sends us positive things, materialistic blessings, blessings in health and happiness, blessings in materialism, blessings in our parnasa, in our livelihood, blessings in all areas. And it works the other way around. It shapes our reality for the good when we're positive. And so this Hasidic version of the law of attraction, which scientifically doesn't, the law of attraction doesn't really have much scientific proof, but this Hasidic version of the law of attraction has a spiritual science behind it. And what is that? We learned earlier that there are different faculties that the soul uses to interact with the world around them, right? The 10 faculties, there's wisdom, understanding, knowledge, kindness, and so on. Kabbalah teaches us that this reflects the process that God uses to create and direct the world. In other words, because God is infinite, in order to create a world of finite multiplicity, as opposed to his infinite singularity, he channeled his energy through 10 divine sources. Forces, not sources, through 10 divine forces. These forces are called in Hebrew Sefirot. These divine forces are like tools that God employs to interact with the world. For example, the divine force of kindness is the tool for God to give indiscriminately. The tool of severity, or in Hebrew, givurah, is the tool of restraint and judgment to withhold and limit the divine benevolence. With the whole spectrum of the divine forces, these 10 forces, wisdom, understanding, knowledge, kindness, severity, compassion, triumph, humility, connection, royalty, these 10 interaction points of divine forces. And more specifically, as each one is embedded in the other, which is a Kabbalistic term that we discussed during the counting of the Omer, we won't get into it. But the idea is that they're all kind of work together. They each embed in each other. And that is how there is a balanced way that this divine energy enters the world. If there would be an overwhelming force of one of these divine forces, it would cause that energy to be overstated in the material world. If there's an overwhelming force of kindness, then that would create an overwhelming force of kindness in the actual world, in the material world. As it says in the Midrash. Here's a Midrash that gives a very powerful analogy, a simplistic analogy that enables us to understand this concept. Text 9. This is analogous to a king who had empty glasses, empty cups. The king told himself, if I pour hot water in them, they will burst. If I pour freezing water in them, they will crack. What did the king do? He mixed hot water with frigid water and poured the blend into the glasses. That's it. It's room temperature now. It's perfect. Similarly, God said, If I create the world with the attribute of compassion alone, people will be unconcerned with the consequences of their actions, right? God's compassionate. We can do whatever we want. But, said God, if I use the attribute of judgment alone, the world will not survive the judgment of honest scrutiny, right? Who will survive in God's honest scrutiny? God's judgment. Rather, said God, I will create it with a blend of the attribute of judgment and the attribute of compassion, and I hope that it will endure. The world that we live in is a delicate balance of competing forces, competing divine forces to enable that the world can operate on its own in what we call nature, which is obviously God, but it's the system that God put in place, which is this delicate balance of various divine forces. We are able to shift that because the human soul was created in the divine image, which is why, just as God has these 10 divine forces through which he creates the world, we have these 10 forces within ourselves. These are our faculties. And so when we project one of the faculties within our soul, we align ourselves and by extension, the world that we inhabit with that divine force and invite that force to be channeled into the world. Take, for example, kindness. When we display an extra measure of kindness, in turn, we are inviting God to channel kindness into the world, but into the world specifically in our domain, in our area, in our atmosphere. When we're happy, we invite God to invest happiness into the world. And the same is true of the opposite of those emotions. Sadness and so on. What we do, we are causing God to do the same for us. And this idea is spelled out clearly in the Zohar, the foundational Kabbalistic text, text 10. Shmuel, can you read for us text 10 on page 20? You have to unmute.
Text 10. Come and observe. Our world is always ready to receive the spiritual flow that emanates from above. The upper world provides in accordance with the emotional state below in the world. If the state below is joyous, then correspondingly abundance from above. But if the state below is one of sadness, then correspondingly the flow of blessing is constricted. We are therefore directed, serve God with joy, because mortal joy elicits corresponding supernal joy.
Thank you. So we have the power to channel the forces of the spiritual world, which trickles down to the way our world functions. And the Baal Shem Tov takes it even a step further. That it's not just our actions or the focus of our minds that affect these divine forces and elicit a divine response. Even just a mere thought, a positive thought, causes a divine response. Think about it like a radio station, right? We can choose whatever station we want to listen to. We just spin the dial, and or now we press the button. No more dials. We press the buttons, or we just type the station on the on the screen, and we can tune into whichever one we want. We can choose which station plays in our car. Our thoughts root us in a certain spiritual mental space, which switches on that spiritual channel. In the words of the Baal Shem Tov, text 11, the psalmist states that one who trusts in God will be enveloped in kindness. We can infer the reverse as well. one who is constantly anxious of punishment, associates themselves with strict judgment that can lead to negative consequences, God forbid. In line with the verse, their fears I will bring to them. You're worried about something, like your father used to tell you. You're crying, I'll give you a reason to cry. We become attached to whatever we contemplate. If we contemplate matters associated with severity, we become attached to judgment. If we trust in God's kindness, our souls will become attached to that kindness, and we will indeed be enveloped in kindness. And so when our minds are focused on something negative like fear, even if we're thinking about how to avoid the fear, we're tuning into that spiritual space of harshness, to that radio channel, to that radio station of divine harshness and judgment that activates that flow. It's not just something we listen to, but over here we're talking about divine channels. And so it activates something that's going to flow to us through that lens. But if we shift our awareness by meditating on something positive, by consciously thinking about something positive, we align ourselves with the divine flow of positivity, which leads to being treated with kindness, which is really something we can do at any moment of the day. Any moment of the day, think about something positive. Even if it isn't what you're feeling at that moment, think about something positive, because first of all, it can reshape how you feel. And second of all, it will elicit a positive response in the universe anyway from the divine, from God, which is why one of the reasons there's a daily ritual in Judaism to thank Hashem for the blessings, in our lives that we may otherwise take for granted. The morning blessings, and it's in the book, and it's one of the appendixes. Appendices, however it's pronounced. I don't know what page it's on, but it's probably about page 30 and onward, where it goes through all the blessings, where we thank God in the morning for the blessings of vision, and for the blessing of that we're able to stand, and for the blessing that we're able to see, and for the blessing that we're able to hear. We make these blessings every morning. I believe it's 17 blessings, if I'm not mistaken, for things that we take for granted. But what's the idea beyond the religious element of the blessings where we're acknowledging and thanking God for them? These daily blessings have immense practical value as a positive meditation exercise to bring the simple awareness of gratitude into our minds, and in turn investing them, our minds, with positivity. Starting our day with these blessings has a psychological benefit of inducing a positive emotional stance and aligning ourselves with God's graciousness, which invites more positive energy into our lives. And so we spent the better part of the past hour sitting in a lotus position, meditating. No, I'm just kidding. We spent the better part of the past hour studying the spiritual technology, which gives a very practical technique to greatly enhance our lives. Practically speaking, what do? Practically speaking, there are three things we can do, and we should all try to do it this week. It's 1 week, 7 days. There are three things we can do. First of all, let's be aware of our thoughts. Let's practice being aware of and actively controlling our thoughts at any given moment of the day. Do it once a day, or perhaps more, but at least once a day. Stop and bring your attention to your thoughts. Think about your thoughts. You can do this when you're feeling something unwanted coming your way, or just anywhere. And gently shift your thinking deliberately to something positive you want to think about, or a Torah thought, or the Rams, or whatever you want to think about. The more we practice being conscious of our thought and thinking deliberately, the more habitual it will become to master over them. That's the first thing we can do. Second thing we can do is invest our minds in wholesome things. Every day this week, spend a few quality minutes, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, but it should be focused, quality minutes, reading, studying, thinking a Torah idea, because our mind wanders unconsciously. but our mind wanders unconsciously to things that we are involved in. And if we make that conscious and focused and deliberate involvement in Torah, then when our mind wanders unconsciously, we're not talking about the deliberate changing of our mind, but when our mind wanders unconsciously, it will wander to these Torah ideas. And by making a habit to have something positive in your back pocket, so to speak, that you learn, that you read, that you talk about, there's a good chance that when your mind wanders, it's going to wander to that. Try it, you'll be amazed. Thirdly and finally, something we can actually do is set a time for daily positive meditation. A few minutes. It doesn't have to be in the lotus position. It doesn't have to be in a yoga position. It doesn't have to be, it can be wherever you want. But a few minutes every day, each morning, if you can't do morning and any other time, and meditate on the wonderful gifts that God has given you in your life. Best is to use this text of the morning blessings as a template. And you'll see that by doing these three things, it'll change your life. We'll do the overview of the lesson, and then we'll move on to questions.
Lesson 1. Do you mind? The surprising powers of Jewish meditation. 1. Meditation is an authentic Jewish practice that plays a large role in Jewish life. 2. We have control over our feelings and have the capacity to overcome negative feelings and experiences. 3. We have the ability to be in control of our thoughts and can choose what we think about at any given moment. 4. Our thinking feeds our emotions. By getting rid of negative thoughts, we cut off negative feelings. 5. Meditating on positive thoughts develops a positive mindset and positive emotions. 6. Positive meditation actually impacts the world around us and elicits a positive response from God, which shapes reality for the good.